Hey everyone, I'm Jess Pruthie from Checkbox, and today I'm joined by Minwu Yim, Customer Success Lead at Checkbox. So today our question is, what are some common pitfalls that people fall into when running automation projects?
That's a really good question, Jess. What I like to think of before I even start thinking about, the pitfalls is how to process the different elements of a project. So I always say that the three elements of any project is people, process, and technology.
Right.
And it's just a good, helpful sort of broad three categories. They all sort of interact with one another. And it's important because when people come to automation projects, they often only think of the people and the technology side of things without necessarily thinking about the process side. So I want to start with that kind of backdrop first before I kind of go into the pitfalls. And it's no surprise that a lot of the issues that people face when starting automation projects happen before they even, kick anything off. Right? So I've divided sort of my categories into before you start, during the project, and after you sort of finish the project. What are the kind of pitfalls across those three categories? So I'll start with before you start. One of the main things that people get wrong is actually the people side of things, right? So they often don't get the right people involved. And then the question is, well, who do you need to get involved? Our recommendation is always to find someone who understands the process. If you're doing an automation project, you're probably doing a project that's either replacing an existing process or looking to sort of do a new process but using this new technology. And so you need to find someone who understands it. One of the mistakes that we often find is that people will actually put forward what we call technologists, people who are really great at building on their technology, but not necessarily understanding the process. And that actually delays projects because there often is a lot of back and forth between sort of these subject matter experts, we call them, and these technologists. So if you can, before you start, find both SMEs and technologists and put them in a group together. The second one is around change management, also in the people category. You often find that you think, well, this new process or this revamped process is going to impact that other party over there, but we'll get them involved at the very end of the project. That's actually a really bad thing to do. I recommend you involve them right from the beginning. Don't discount the value of buy-in. Buy-in is really important. It's the intangible sort of feeling and confidence that people have, and especially when it impacts another group within the organization, you really want to be getting everyone who's going to be impacted by the new sort of automation tool or process involved right from the beginning. And then the third one around people is clear responsibilities. It's really easy to kind of have a group and say, look, this group is responsible for the project, but what we've seen time and time again through experience is that having one person responsible for the outcome, really someone taking the lead, someone making the decisions, is really quintessential for the success of the project. We've seen some projects where you might have 2 leaders or 3 leaders, and what often happens is that instead of having sort of a democratic kind of process of making decisions, you often have sort of a kind of 2 cogs being stuck. Right? You end up not being able to progress the project because you may have differing opinions, or certain non-essential items become sort of elevated to essential opinions and pause the project on hold. So our recommendation is find and someone to take the lead and make the responsibilities really clear across the group. Still in the before you start category, we have sort of the requirements pitfalls. So a lot of people start their automation projects without fully understanding what the process actually is. Actually, one of the main things is the process is either not documented correctly or doesn't have consensus within the business. So if you don't have the process documented, that often takes time. So if you start diving into the implementation before you map it out, you have this sort of back and forth cycle where you're constantly going back and kind of revising what the process is, trying to understand it, and also in conjunction trying to implement it. It just doesn't work. The other problem is when that process is so distributed that people are kind of acting out that process in their own understanding of it. A common one is sort of the procurement process. People think that the procurement process is fairly defined, but a lot of the time what ends up happening is the business, when they interface with, let's say, suppliers, kind of almost have their own magic, their own rules when it comes to engagement. So finding consensus in the process and agreement in the organization is really important before you even move to thinking about automation. Then we have some technology pitfalls. So the first one is around lack of education. So making sure you understand what the tool is and what it can do, and more importantly, what it can't do. Automation is such a broad term, and it's very easy to say this tech's going to solve everything. Surprise, technology does not solve everything. So don't walk into there thinking that it will solve everything, but try to understand what it can do, leverage that, and then avoid obviously the things that it can't do. The other one around technology is trying to solve everything using it. So instead of kind of going in there and saying, technology is going to solve all our problems, our recommendation is to think, what is the 80% of the work that we can automate and really bring value to, and try to capture that first. Don't try to eat the whole pie, or whatever the saying is. If you can automate 80% and 20% is money, that's still a win. So go ahead and do that. And the last one is business case. Before you start a project, defining the type of benefits that you want to try and achieve is really important, because later on when you finish the project, you actually want to measure your sort of ROI in real time against what you actually benchmarked at the very beginning. And that's really useful later on when you have to sort of justify the why a particular automation project should continue to run, right?
Yep.
So there's a whole slew before you start. During the project, there's a couple key ones. So the first one is around milestoning. So a lot of project teams kind of do it on a rolling basis. My encouragement is try to set up some really key milestones. That's with any project, but it's really important, particularly in automation, when you might have, say, people become quite busy and they might fall off the sort of automation project timeline. So bringing them back into the fold is really important. And so those milestones act as a way to trigger that conversation again and say, hey, look, we haven't met in 4 weeks. We want to get to the next milestone. Can we either progress without you, or can we get someone else in the team? So it's really great, sort of almost quasi or artificial boost or trigger for the project to continue. And the other one is around scope creep. So scope creep often happens when you, and for those who don't know, scope creep is when obviously the size of the project changes over the lifeline of the project. And usually happens because you either don't understand the process correctly from the get-go, and so these new sort of what we call grey areas of the process begin to emerge.
Right.
Or if you haven't got the right people to comment on what that process is ahead of time. So again, it's a people and process thing as opposed to a technology pitfall, right? So avoiding scope creep can be done if you get the right people and you understand the process right from the beginning. But if you ever do face scope creep, one of the best ways to sort of avoid it is to phase things out and say, all right, well, looks like we've missed this massive section of the project that we should address. Why don't we start with V1, address this first, and then in V2, we can then have a discussion about how this new area that we've missed can come into the tool.
Yeah.
Final one is after the project is complete. So the first one is around change management and how to actually deploy your automation tools or automation project. So thinking through the impact of that, and as I mentioned very early on, getting the people who are going to be impacted by the change involved very early on, regardless of whether or not they're commenting on the process or going to be building out your particular tool. You need to get their buy-in. It's an emotional journey that you need to bring them on, and so that's really important from the get-go. The second one is around maintenance. Technology degrades over time. There's a depreciating factor. So you need to be thinking about who's going to be maintaining this, what's the process for maintaining your technology. Unfortunately, that's the reality of tech. You need to be coming back to it and making sure it's updated. And the last one is around return on investment. So remember I said at the very beginning, one of the steps that people often forget is around business case and tracking what type of benefits I want to get.
Yeah.
So right at the end, what you want to be doing is tracking the return on investment or the type of benefits that your tools are generating, and then benchmarking to see if it meets or goes under or over exceeds the type of benefit benchmarks you set out in your business case. So there's plenty more. Those are the ones I thought of, and hopefully that's helpful for you. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out, and we can have a chat about how we can boost your automation project lifelines.
Awesome, that was actually really good information. Thank you for that, Min. If you guys would like to learn more about legal automation or just automation in general, we've got some awesome webinars on our page. We've got white papers that you can access and just more resources for you to check out. See you guys next time.